Grandfather Arthur had always been a quiet presence at the table. Steady hands, slow breathing, the kind of man who didn't speak unless the words mattered. So when he calmly set down his fork in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner, the soft clink on the porcelain plate felt louder than the laughter bouncing around the room. Marissa was in the middle of another story about her new condo. 4 bedrooms, modern faucets. Imported Italian marble, she said like she personally carved it out of a mountain. Mom and Dad were nodding along, absorbed, orbiting around her like they always did. I was used to it. I'd spent 26 years being the quiet one, learning to take up less space, learning to make silence feel like safety. But then Grandfather Arthur reached for the laptop he'd set on the empty chair beside him, opened it and looked straight at me. "Ellen," he said, his voice steady. "Did you get the email about your trust fund?" The room froze. Mom's smile dropped so fast it was almost audible. Dad went completely still, eyes flicking to Mom like he needed permission to breathe. Marissa actually paused mid-chew, fork suspended in the air like a scene from a paused movie. I stared at him, feeling my pulse thud in my ears. "My what?" Grandfather tilted the screen toward me. "Your trust fund. The one that was set up when you were 16. Silence. Heavy, suffocating, intentional. I didn't know I had one. I managed." Mom was the first to speak, voice too bright, too quick. "Dad, honestly, this is not the time." But he cut her off. "It is exactly the time." His eyes didn't leave me. He wasn't asking. He already knew the answer, and suddenly all those quiet years swarmed back. Mom telling me, "Don't make things complicated, Ellen," whenever I asked questions, whenever I wanted clarity, whenever I needed something beyond the bare minimum. The way she brushed off my college financial concerns. The scholarships I had to scrape together. The part-time jobs. The nights studying under flickering library lights because I couldn't afford a tutor like Marissa. Meanwhile, Marissa coasted on open doors, family help, effortless privilege. She never wanted for anything. I had always assumed that was just how it was. She was the favorite, the golden child, the one who filled the room while I tried not to disturb the air. But now I was sitting at a dinner table learning that there was money. My money, that I had never been told about. Someone in that room had been making decisions about my finances, my opportunities, my future. And if I was right, this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was 10 years of silence built on top of one very deliberate lie. What I discovered next would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. Grandfather Arthur turned the laptop toward me, and the glow of the screen lit up rows and rows of emails, hundreds of them. 10 years worth of trust fund statements, notifications, quarterly summaries, wire confirmations, and alerts. All addressed to me. Except. Not to me. My stomach tightened as I leaned in. The contact information at the top of every statement listed my name, my birthday, but not my email address. Instead, the primary email was my mother's. Her personal one. The one she never let anyone touch. For a moment I just stared, my brain trying to stitch together a version of reality that made sense. Maybe it was a clerical error. Maybe the bank mixed up accounts. No. Hundreds of errors. For a decade. I clicked on one of the oldest messages. The timestamp hit me first. The same week my freshman year scholarship fell short and I sat on the phone begging the financial aid office for a payment extension. I remembered calling Mom afterward, crying, telling her I didn't know how I was going to afford books. She had sighed and said, "Ellen, college is expensive for everyone. You'll figure it out." But this email, this one right here, showed a deposit made into the trust fund that same week. Money that could have covered everything. My throat tightened. I clicked another. This one was from the month my car broke down on the highway in the middle of winter. I'd missed 2 shifts at work, fallen behind on rent, and skipped meals to catch up. And there, sitting in the inbox I never had access to, was a message titled, "Available Funds Notice." My hands shook as I opened another. And another. And another. Behind me, Mom finally spoke. "Banks make mistakes all the time, Ellen." Grandfather's voice cut through the room like a blade. "They don't make this kind." The truth sat heavy, undeniable, suffocating. Every email matched a moment when I had needed help and been told to manage on my own. Someone had rewritten my life on purpose. But the question that burned through me was, why? Why would a mother do this to her own daughter? The answer was more devastating than I could have imagined. The longer I stared at those emails, the tighter the air in the dining room became. It felt as if the walls were listening, waiting for the moment everything snapped. Finally, I looked up at my mother. "Why were these sent to your email?" I asked, my voice steady but thin. Mom exhaled like I was inconveniencing her. "Ellen, sweetheart, you don't know how these things work." There was that tone. The one that reduced me back into a child who asked too many questions. The one that made me feel small, manageable, quiet. But this time it didn't land the same way. "I know exactly how email works," I said. "I'm asking why every notification about my trust fund was sent to you." She lifted her chin. "It was probably a mistake. These banks mix things up all the time." Grandfather Arthur didn't even look up from the screen. "No, they don't." The excuse crumbled on contact, but Mom kept her smile plastered on, the kind she used at church potlucks when she wanted to seem perfectly composed. "Ellen, honestly, you're overreacting. Nothing here is what you think." But everything was exactly what I thought. And worst, my memories rose like a tide I couldn't hold back. The day my debit card got declined at the campus bookstore, and I walked out pretending I'd forgotten my wallet. The winter break when everyone else went home and I stayed to work overtime, ringing up customers with numb fingers because the store heater broke again. The nights I cried quietly in a bathroom stall so my roommates wouldn't see me, embarrassed by how hard I was struggling. And every time I reached out, my mother's voice had the same cool finality. "Life's expensive, Ellen. We just have to make do." Except she hadn't been making do. Not for Marissa. Marissa with her endless summer programs. Marissa with the paid internships. Marissa with the car at 16, the apartment at 20, the condo at 24. Marissa who never heard the word no, unless it was from me. I felt something inside my chest tighten. A slow, rising clarity. I stood up. My chair scraped sharply against the hardwood floor, echoing like the start of something irreversible. The entire table jolted at the sound. Why was I the only one who didn't know? I asked, every word shaking loose a decade of swallowed questions. Mom's composure faltered for the first time. "This isn't about Marissa," she snapped too quickly. "I didn't mention Marissa," I replied. Her face went rigid. Grandfather watched silently, eyes narrowed, as if confirming something he'd long suspected. I drew in a breath and felt the quiet version of myself peeling away, layer by layer. "This ends tonight," I said. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. But inside something solidified, something sharp, something certain. I wasn't just the quiet one anymore. And what Grandpa revealed next in his study would expose the full extent of my mother's manipulation. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, you need to hear what happened next. Grandfather Arthur stood first, closing the laptop with a decisive snap. "We're not doing this at the table," he said. "Everyone, to the study." The command carried weight, decades of authority wrapped in quiet disappointment. No one argued. We filed down the hallway in stiff silence. The study door creaked open, releasing the familiar scent of leather and old paper. Warm amber lamps glowed against the dark wood shelves filled with thick, embossed books. The family crest hung above the fireplace, a brass reminder that this room had seen every truth the family ever tried to bury. Excuses didn't survive in here. Grandfather set the laptop on the wide oak desk and opened an email dated 10 years earlier. "This," he said, tapping the screen, "is when the contact information on Ellen's trust fund was changed. Name, my birthday, my account, but the new email address. My mother's." He clicked again, opening a log window most people wouldn't even know how to access. "Here," he continued, "is the IP address where the change was made." The numbers glowed cold and undeniable. My childhood home in Seattle. Mom inhaled sharply. "Dad, Look, I was just trying to keep things organized." I stepped closer, my pulse hammering. "Organized? You left me working double shifts while money in my name sat untouched." Mom's eyes flashed with irritation. "You were too young to understand responsibility. I laughed, a small broken sound. I understood responsibility better than anyone in this room. Grandfather pulled up another file. A confirmation email from the bank acknowledging the change. This was sent to the Seattle IP address again 3 months later. Same signature. Same device. Mom's voice thinned. It was complicated. No, Grandfather said. It wasn't. That's not organization. That's control. Marissa shifted, arms tightly crossed. Her eyes flicked between the screen and Mom, guilt tightening her expression. I didn't know it was yours, Ellen. I swear. Mom snapped her head toward her. Marissa, don't. The warning was sharp enough to slice the air. But it was too late. Marissa already looked like someone who'd accidentally stepped into a truth she wasn't meant to acknowledge. A truth she'd benefited from. Marissa, I said quietly, what did you think the money was? She hesitated. Too long. I just thought it was family support. For, opportunities. Opportunities. Condo. The internships. The trips. My stomach twisted. Dad finally spoke. His voice thin and gray. We should have told her. The sentence hung like a confession he'd been sitting on for years. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I turned back to Mom. You kept every notification, every update, every chance I had to make my life easier. Why? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The excuses had run wide, so I asked the question that punched a hole through every lie she had built. Why didn't you redirect Marissa's trust fund emails? Silence. Heavy. Absolute. She had no answer. But the truth that came out next revealed the real reason my mother kept me in the dark, and it had nothing to do with protecting me. Grandfather clicked open another email, one from 3 years ago. An annual allocation update. My name at the top. My mother's email beneath it. I knew exactly where I'd been the night that email arrived. Crying quietly in my tiny apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes I couldn't afford to move. My rent had gone up. My job had cut hours. I'd skipped dinner again, telling myself I wasn't hungry. I'd called Mom, voice cracking, asking if I could come home for a few weeks. She had sighed. Ellen, honey. Life is expensive. We all have to tough it out. Meanwhile, this email, this money, was sitting untouched. Grandfather turned the laptop toward her. Explain this. For the first time, Mom's composure cracked. Her fingers trembled against the edge of the desk. You wouldn't have made good decisions, she finally said. You were always sensitive, easily overwhelmed. I stared at her, stunned. Sensitive. I was exhausted. I was starving. I was alone. She shook her head as if rewriting history could save her. You don't understand. If you had access to that money, Ellen, you would have left us. My breath caught. That's what this is about. I whispered. She pressed her lips together, eyes glossy with a fear I'd never seen before. You're not like Marissa, she said quietly. She's strong. She knows what she wants. But you drift. You disappear into your own world. Money would have made it easier for you to go. It hit me like a cold wave. She didn't hide the money because I was irresponsible. She hid it because she was afraid I'd grow up without her permission. That wasn't your decision to make, I said, barely audible. She reached toward me, desperate now. Everything I did was for this family. Grandfather's voice cut through her last defense. If this was about protecting the family, he said, eyes narrowed, why is it only Ellen you kept powerless? Why not Marissa? Silence again, this time thick with truth. Mom's mouth opened, then closed. No justification. No spin. No motherly wisdom to hide behind. She had drawn the lines of control herself, deciding who got freedom and who stayed small. And finally, I saw her clearly. Not as the authority I had spent my life trying to please, but as someone terrified of losing the version of me she could manage. She didn't hide the money because I was irresponsible. She hid it because she was afraid I'd grow up without her permission, and that moment I understood. This wasn't about money. It was about power. And I was about to take mine back. Grandfather didn't hesitate. He reached for his phone with the same steady resolve he'd carried through the entire confrontation. "I can call the bank representative tonight," he said. "We'll start the process of transferring access back to you." For a moment, the room felt suspended. Then I answered. "Yes," I said. "I want that." It was the first time in years I had spoken without apologizing, without shrinking, without checking my mother's expression for permission. Mom lurched forward as if the words physically struck her. "Ellen, please," she said, voice cracking. "We can handle this privately. There's no need to drag other people into this." I met her eyes, feeling something sharp settle into place. "This doesn't get handled in the dark." She shook her head, panic rising. "You don't understand what this means." "Oh, I understand exactly what it means." My voice didn't waver. "Mom, you didn't build it. You borrowed it from me." Her face went pale, the truth landing harder than anything I could have shouted. Grandfather nodded, steady and certain. "You're doing the right thing, Ellen." Dad didn't speak. Marissa didn't move. But the silence around them said everything. They had always lived comfortably in the version of the family Mom curated, the one where I stayed small enough not to disrupt anything. But those days were gone. Grandfather stepped aside so I could sit at the desk. My hands hovered for a moment before touching the keyboard. It felt symbolic, the first time I'd ever touched something that belonged to me but had been withheld for years. As he dialed the bank representative, I listened to the rings on speakerphone, each one marking the end of a chapter one had never consented to. When the representative answered, Grandfather introduced me, not as the child who needed guidance, but as the account holder reclaiming her rights. And it was in that moment, hearing my name spoken with authority instead of dismissal, that something inside me shifted. A before and after line etched so cleanly that I could feel it dividing my life. Mom sat back slowly, defeated, her last attempt at control slipping through her fingers. And for the first time I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel like the quiet daughter trying to keep the peace. For the first time I felt it too. Not triumph, not revenge, just clarity. A truth that finally belonged to me. But the real transformation happened in the days that followed, when I discovered just how much had been stolen from me. The call came back faster than any of us expected. Not even an hour later, Grandfather's phone lit up with the bank representative returning his message. He put it on speaker so everyone could hear. "Hello, this is regarding the contact restoration for Ellen Hale," the representative said. Hearing my name, my real name, attached to my own account felt unreal. "We've updated the email and phone number to the rightful owner. You should receive full access within the next few minutes." Something inside me loosened. A breath I didn't know I'd been holding for 10 years finally exhaled. Grandfather squeezed my hand, pride shining through his usually stern expression. Mom sat stiffly on the sofa, her shoulders caved in, offering no argument this time. Dad didn't look away when our eyes met, just guilt, unfiltered and heavy. Marissa stepped closer and whispered, "I'm sorry, Ellen. I really didn't know." When the call ended, everyone drifted out of the study except me. I stayed behind, alone with the warm lamplight and the quiet hum of the laptop. Notifications were already flooding in. Statements, updates, alerts. My inbox filled with a decade of messages I should have received all along. 10 years of what? 10 years of choices stolen. 10 years of a life rerouted without my permission. But not anymore. I closed the laptop gently, stood and slipped on my coat. There was nothing left to say to anyone. Not tonight. I walked out of Grandpa's house with nothing but a coat and a decade's worth of clarity. For the first time, my future belonged to me. Not the people who feared I'd claim it. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been made to feel invisible or had someone try to control your future, share your experience in the comments below. And subscribe because next week, I'm revealing what I discovered when I finally accessed those trust fund statements, and the shocking amount my mother kept from me all those years. You won't believe what happened next.